Hey, Jeff, you got to turn on your video, I think, to be considered actually here. Jeff Shattuck. Okay, I'm showing 3:02, so we'll go ahead and get the meeting started. Jennifer, record the roll call, please.
Steve Brittingham. Mike Goodwin. Gwen Hammock.
Here.
Brandon Johnson.
Here.
Chris Pierce.
Here.
Janet Reed. Jeff Shattuck. Ashley Studeville.
I think that we do have quorum. Is that right? All right. So go ahead and do the opening invocation. Jeff, would you mind opening us up with prayer? Hammock?
Yes. Father, thank you for all that you give us and guide us and direct us. Help us with the decisions each day, especially with our DIA and working with all the other entities. Father, we just ask you to give us clarity in decision making and just help us to proceed according to your will. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Also go ahead and show that Jeff Shattuck is here as well. All right, move on to number 4, which is consideration and action for the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting for May 11th, 2020. So once you've had some time to look over those, I'll entertain a motion to accept those.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion.
Yeah, I'll second.
I have a second. And Secretary, record the vote, please.
Steve Brittingham.
Aye.
Jeff Hammock.
Yes.
Brandon Johnson.
Yes.
Chris Pierce.
Yes.
Janet Reed.
Yes.
Jeff Shattuck.
Yes.
All right, now we'll move on to item 5, which is the review of Industrial Authority financial reports.
Yeah, I'll have Lisa and I, as well as met with Ann Chin last week to go over, as we talked about last month, kind of creating a dashboard to kind of summary page of these financials. So not a whole lot of new things this go around than the previous month, but just know that we've had a meeting and that we'll get that set up for everybody, kind of out of a better feel, at least in a summary fashion of so what we're looking at on it. Just you'd love to hear feedback is just where we are cash wise, income and expenses, of course, summary on there forward as well. So we might add a few more things, but love to. It's a working document, so if anybody has any comments or suggestions, I'd love to hear them.
All right, any questions about the financials?
Okay, on the financial statement for April, we have a $500, is this that's the annual budget. Never mind. I'm sorry, I overlooked it. Brandon, on the summary that you are including, or will include, or is it included?
No, we just met last week. And so first it's understanding all the movement on the financials, as well as just, city financials of when it's, some of the liabilities are looked at on an annual basis as far as updated for it. And so just trying to get a handle on that first, and then we can create the dashboard. But thought Ann Chin did a great job of walking us through each one, both the 020 and the 110, I believe, right? If I get these right in it. And so hopefully, like I said, we can next month, Lisa and I are going to sit down later this month and kind of go through it. And then we'll create that for everybody to review in July.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 6, which is the consideration and action for the Durant Industrial Authority's claims for April 2020. You taking that one too, Brandon?
Yeah, so that was out this morning. It's the
Looks like there are 3 of the, there's some more.
yeah, it's just it's the payments.
Yep.
Is what's on there. And you can see those on the financials as well. Those broken out on the claim on pooled cash statement. Is where it's broken out, but you also can see it on the financials themselves.
Once you've had time to look those over, entertain a motion to accept those as written.
Second.
A motion and second for the approval of the claims. Secretary, record the vote, please.
Steve Brittingham,
Aye.
Jeff Hammack,
Yes.
Brandon Johnson,
Yes.
Chris Pierce,
Yes.
Janet Reed,
Yes.
Jeff Shattuck.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to item 7, which is the consider and take action on hiring an attorney to review and consolidate the trust indenture. So there are some legal things that we would need to do here, but the trust indenture is over the years has been modified and amended. And so what we're asking for, or what I'm asking for here, is that we look at the price for an attorney to just look over that trust indenture, clean it up, move it to one document that can be emailed out. It's probably going to still have all the same wording in it. Will have all the same wording in there. It's just going to be a little bit easier to digest if you have a new person that's looking at it, instead of the document that we're sending out now that's kind of halfway.
Chris, are we referring to the trust indenture or the bylaws?
I was referring to the bylaws. It says trust indenture in here, but it should be actually the bylaws. So I don't know if we can. Yeah, it should have actually been written as bylaws, so I would probably say we need to table that until next board meeting, so we can get that wording right. So, yes, bylaws, sorry. Trust indenture would be something we could not do. But the bylaws, they're just, they're all over the place, and so we would just want to condense those down to be a little bit easier to digest. So we'll talk about that next board meeting. So I guess we'll table that. Item 8 is to consider and take action on moving the Durant Industrial Authority.
A few questions on that my board would like me to ask before we proceed with any type of vote.
Sure, go ahead.
On April the 20th, we discussed that the printer would no longer be included in that revenue resource, and we voted to remove it. If in fact, we also approved, I believe in that same meeting, a schedule for adoption of the budget, which included the following year compensation for the DIA to remain in the office at the Chamber of Commerce. If in fact this was planning on being done, why was that not brought up at this meeting?
The only thing I would say to that is that without it being an agenda item on the agenda, there wouldn't be any way we could discuss anything like that.
We were discussing the budget at that time. And that's when the printer was removed. There was never anything mentioned about the office moving at that time. And I believe, if I'm correct, we received notification from the city manager on May the 8th, which was after the posting time frame for the May meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's why it's on the day's agenda instead of last month's.
So if this was a plan, as I said, my board is wanting to know why this was not mentioned before it was approved in the minutes of the consideration for the budget, which was approved on that month.
I can't speak for the city manager on why he sent it out at a particular time, but I'd be happy to invite him up to tell us if he wants.
I didn't send it out at any particular time for any specific reason. We've talked about this since December, the chairman and I have. So, and I know several members of the board were involved in those discussions when we even talked about, when we did the interviewing for hiring for a director. So,
Was
it
I
wasn't new.
excluded for a specific reason?
No, ma'am.
So on May 8th, when this was given to our chairman, that was the first knowledge that I had of this in written form. It was the first time that I knew about it.
That was the first knowledge anybody had written about it.
Why was this considered, since the DIA had already voted to remain in the chamber?
They didn't vote to remain in the chamber.
Excuse me, let me
They
rephrase
voted on a
that.
budget.
They voted on a budget.
Yes, ma'am.
I too know that a budget can be amended at any time. But that led me to believe, as the executive director of the chamber, that we would and could rely on that source of income for another year. And I will be honest, had this been brought to our attention in January or February, it would not have been an issue financially. It is now with the COVID. We are not eligible for any type of program at this particular time to help compensate us for any losses that we had. This will be a financial burden on the chamber. What was the decision in moving that, if I may ask?
It's a business decision is the way I see it. The director works for the city, all right? And then the DIA pays the chamber rent for a facility that's going to house a city employee. That doesn't even make sense to me, why we would not house a city employee in a city facility.
But it's my understanding that we share that person.
We do.
What would be the difference in them being in a facility as opposed to being in the city hall? I mean, the situation, that office was actually put together for the DIA. It was suited. They had the conference room, the telephone is there. The telephone is actually part of the chamber. And moving that number will have to stay with the chamber because it's part of our switchboard. That's what I'm saying. There are things that we were never consulted about or asked about before this move.
Okay. That was a plan that was talked about before I ever even got here, though. Was moving the DIA to a city facility. That was previous administration talked about. So
Yeah, I
my
believe-
assumption is that's been talked about long before I got here. This was not new to anybody. So,
Yeah, and I also believe that, I mean, no written things here, but, you know, it's been discussed amongst individuals, I guess, without a quorum, that original plan was to move the DIA out to the airport, which John and I talked about that. I told him I thought that was a bad idea because Lisa would be traveling 90% of her time back and forth. And so for me, I'm at least excited that it's here in City Hall instead of out there.
But again, I will ask, if that was the situation, why was that not brought up when we started discussing budget items?
I don't have an answer for you, Janet. I guess really a thought of like that would be something that we would probably. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other discussion on the? I think you have a copy of the city manager's intent there that was sent out, and so any further discussion on that?
Just one other comment I would like to make. Those dollars are not taxpayers' dollars in the O2O account. 110 account is the trust indenture, and that is a 1/4 cent sales tax.
I agree. That's 100% true. Any further discussion? If not, I guess I'll call for a vote for us to accept that, or whatever the board's desire is there.
Since I wasn't here the last time, I think, Chris, that this was voted upon. Are there any major differences in this?
So we're not voting on anything we voted on before.
Okay.
This will be the city giving us a location over here at the city hall. It's the it'll save the DIA what you just voted on your claim, Jeff.
Yeah.
None of that money will be coming out of the O2O account.
Okay.
So to Janet's point about that money not being taxpayer money, that's true. Also, we only have limited funds there. And so that will be money that we can spend elsewhere to promote the DIA as well. As we can sit here and gridlock all day long, or we can actually make a motion on this and then it can fail after that if we want. But I'd probably suggest that we at least do that and call for a vote.
Well, I'll make a motion that we move the Durant Industrial Authority Executive Director to City Hall.
Got a motion on the floor?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Secretary record vote.
Steve Brittingham,
Aye.
Jeff Hammack,
Yes.
Brandon Johnson,
Yes.
Chris Pierce,
Yes.
Janet Reed,
No.
Jeff Shattuck.
Yes.
Move on to item number 9, which is consider and take action of the proposed agreement with the city of Durant. I think you have in your additional documents that were sent out that proposed agreement from Lisa. And so Lisa, you want to come up and anything you want to talk about on that, or we had a committee meeting. I just wanted you to be here so that if you wanted to talk about something or add anything to it. Agreement's pretty simplified. We took out some verbiage.
It's no longer a contract, it's an agreement, so we won't be running this annually as we have in the past.
And that the committee just kind of met, and our thoughts on it was that every year we spend tons of time on talking about said contract that, you know, we always want to have some kind of opinion on making a change here and there. And so if this is an agreement that just is an agreement between the city and the DIA, it just seems like it works a little bit better. This agreement will be standing until such time that either party decides that we need to change something on that agreement. And that way we won't have to do this year after year. And I think it'll be, the committee actually feels like it'll be a little bit of a time saver for the DIA and the city. So it'll be better resource use of our resources and time. Entertain any questions that you might have. That committee was myself, Jeff Hammack, Brandon, and then the city manager and Lisa were there as well.
Chris, one of the things that came up out of the meeting that we had was that none of the other authorities had a contract such as the DIA. And that's another reason why it was felt in an agreement, kind of like an ending agreement, but it still states purposes and scopes of services that we can follow.
That's correct.
If you reference the second page of this agreement under employees and benefits, it does say that the director shall be responsible for overseeing and carrying out economic development activities and operations of both the city and the DIA. So nothing's really changing there.
Correct.
How is it binding? How is this binding?
Well, there is no other contract with any other authority in the city. So I guess I would ask the question that if a contract's needed to have an agreement between an authority and the city, then why are none of the other authorities doing that? And so the idea there is that we probably should have never had a contract in the beginning. And so this is just an agreement that is set forth to work in the future. And that way we don't have to have that contract and we don't have to put that time into discussing it every year. Well, I think the idea was that we've had a contract in the past. And so since this is a new thing, we just kind of wanted to set this into motion. And so I do think that it calls for a vote. Jeff, is that kind of your intent? You were the one that wanted to have the agreement, and we talked about that as a committee. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just looking at the overall structure of not just the DIA, but the other authorities, and then it made more sense to have an agreement, not just to stop doing a contract, but have an agreement that's perpetual in nature. And, the monies that we receive, we still, as the DIA, will manage those and go about doing our work as the DIA, along with Lisa's input and help and everything else. But, the agreement seemed like it was the more logical. It would just be an agreement that would just continue on, and we wouldn't have to renew it from year to year.
Does that answer your question on the intent?
No.
Well, then can you give me some clarity on it?
An agreement, that's not anything binding. How is Lisa going to know who to take instructions from? I don't think there's clarity here.
Well, I think that, outside of the agreement, the city employee, so she takes her instructions from the city manager as all the other city employees do as well.
Well,
So-
that's my point.
So I don't think we need to have that in that agreement, because that's already stated elsewhere, I believe.
But basically, she's not working for the DIA at all.
Well, she'll have the title of the Durant Industrial Authority Executive Director, which is just another hat that the executive director wears.
She would also be recruiting for industrial as well, for the DIA,
Correct.
not through the city.
The
And that's the-
DIA has always recruited for retail and for total economic development. And there's plenty of documentation to substantiate that in the office.
And that part, Jay, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, her role won't be any different than it is now. Having a contract that specifies you're gonna pay for X amount of this or X amount of that doesn't specify what Lisa's role is already. What she's doing isn't changing, and it's actually in the agreement. What is the scope? What is she doing? Who does she answer to? It's spelled out just like it was before. So I don't want you to be nervous about that. It's no difference. Nothing's changing there. We just tried to make this more simple and to bring it more in line with what the other authorities do. The authority, the airport authority, nobody else has an agreement. The city doesn't have an agreement with the tourism authority.
But none of those have an executive director with the title of Durant Industrial Authority Executive Director. None of those.
We have there's a person in charge of the airport. There's a person in charge of the Durant City Utility Authority, right? So it's all.
And those people are all city employees.
City employees. It's no different, Janet.
And
Well,
we kept the same language as the previous contract.
Exactly.
So the only thing we took out was just what the city is responsible from a pay standpoint, which they're already doing. And so that would
And
be
the
only
expiration
binding
of
thing
contract.
you'd want. I mean, there's nothing you could bind in here in the agreement really anyway,
Well,
other than
and
the city paying.
Brandon,
for-
that's my point. Exactly.
But
Why do
what
we
else
even
would be
need it?
binding though? I guess. is
Well,
what
why do
I'm-
we even need an agreement?
Yeah, we thought just from a mutual thing of keeping it, right? I mean, it doesn't
Just to
hurt to
tie
have
up
it.
loose ends was our thought, is that we don't want to have an agreement or a contract anymore. We don't want to have a contract anymore. And so this agreement would be a long-standing document that would reference that we stopped having a contract. And so it just felt the best course of action for have that written somewhere and memorialized on paper, and then to move on with our business as doing what's best for the city and for the Durant Industrial Authority.
Yeah, and I think the most important part is just the clarity it creates under Lisa's job, right? Of, hey, she's a city employee, she's economic director for the city, but also serves as DIA executive director. So that's where we thought we wanted to keep that in, and thought it's worthwhile to just have an agreement on file, just saying, hey, here's what we all understand, right? I think is what I was behind it.
But what Lisa will do for the city is what I direct her to do. What Lisa will do for DIA is what you guys develop, and she's tasked to implement. I mean, it's no different than it has been. So, except
I
the
think-
city
I
is
think
really
probably
going to have
Jack-
an economic development department at this point, which hasn't happened in the past.
I don't want to speak for you, Janet, but I think what you might be saying is what happens if there's a conflict in those duties. And I would say in that case, then the DIA and the city need to get together and iron it out and figure out what's going on. And those will be case by case issues and instances instead of, something that a contract would even forego anyway.
I think it's just going to put whomever is in that position, which is Lisa at this point, in a very uncomfortable position. And I think the mayor herself stated when we started talking about a contract, which was over a year and a half ago, that it's very hard and difficult to serve two masters.
I would just ask you though, what's different in that contract and what you're seeing in this agreement that you're thinking that there's a change in
The
that?
contract was that there was a definite partnership between the two and that they would have equal say. That's usually what a partnership is unless it's broken down into percentages.
So I don't think that, I mean, that may have been what, I read the original contract, signed it last year, actually. I never saw that as part of it as if you look at the wording on there for, it's the same wording that's in this agreement of the employee and benefits. It says the city shall employ an economic development director who shall be under the supervision of the Durant city manager. And that's always been the same thing that was in that contract originally as well. Jeff, do you have anything else you were kind of running?
Well, we wanted to keep the purpose. Purpose is kind of summarizes the agreement with the city and the DIA as far as what we're trying to accomplish, trying to, move in the same direction. And even though Lisa is a city employee, she still also answers to the DIA as far as what the needs may be for the DIA. And I think that in the purpose in A and B, that simplifies that discussion.
Any further questions? Janet?
No.
If not, then move on to need a motion to accept that agreement. And then, like I said, next year, the purpose of that is that we don't have to do that every year, which is a benefit a little bit.
I'll move to make that motion.
Yeah, I'll second.
Secretary, call for a vote.
Steve Brittingham,
Aye.
Jeff Hammack,
Yes.
Brandon Johnson,
Yes.
Chris Pierce,
Yes.
Janet Reed,
Yes.
Jeff Shattuck.
Yes.
Chris, if I may point out on that contract, the numerical, there is no page 3.
Okay.
So, page 4 or 4.
I think that was, yeah. We can get that fixed up. I believe that was just because of the condensing of that contract, Steve, and we probably, that just did, something didn't
Right.
compute.
I just want to make sure
Yes,
everybody was
sir.
aware there was.
That has to do with when you change it over to Adobe PDF and somewhere along the line, we didn't catch that extra page in there. We'll fix that and send it back out.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 10, which is the monthly update for the DIA. Ms. Taylor?
So I've included a monthly report. Did anybody have any questions? Have you read?
Lisa, did they think that the widening of that has helped the Cardinal Glass? I haven't talked to Sean in the last few days since it's been open.
I haven't had a
Until we
chance to
done.
talk to Sean. I've talked to a few employees that work out there, and a couple times I heard the comment that it doesn't help when you're trying, it helps the trucks when they're trying to get off the highway. It's not really helping when you're sitting on Cardinal Way waiting to make a left turn or even a right turn for that matter. So I drove it the other day, and they're pretty on spot with that comment. It took me several minutes for a break in traffic to come through there. So I have talked to Anthony E. Kelly from Department of Transportation, and they are getting ready to conduct, I've formally requested a traffic study be conducted again. So it's been several years since they've done one, and we both felt like that was the next step to take. But the widening of Cardinal Way has helped with the truck traffic.
I know that when we originally started with that and I had contacted Anthony, when I thought that they were going to do that traffic count prior to that to see if they could help analyze exactly what the situation was. Was that not done
Right, so
prior to?
right. So a traffic study is not just about the traffic count. It's also about the average speed of
Right.
people that are driving through there at any given time. And when they determine, so we're looking at lowering the speed through there. The way that they determine the speed, it's kind of weird the way it works, is they determine what the average speed is and they pick something that is close to that.
Right.
And so I hesitate to say this because please don't quote me. I'm trying to do this by memory right now, but I believe he said the average speed through there was like 68 miles an hour. And since maximum speed is typically 65 on a highway like that, they went with 65. So it's been a few years since they've done this study, and we decided that that's the next logical step is to do another traffic study.
And just one other thing, the Tubasex, they have employed 57 at this point, and they are looking at rescheduling that just as soon as the travel has been lifted. She's been doing a good job. She's been busy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. If there's not other questions, there is something that I wanted to address that's on this report.
After you.
If you look on there, I have requests for information. So those are the requests we get from various partners, Department of Commerce, contacts that I have. Those are requests for information. So they may have a project or a company that's looking to move, and they are sending out a request for information that says, here's what the project is, and we need you to complete all of this information, tell us what you'll offer or what you have, and we narrow it down from there. And you'll see on there that I've had, well, now in May, I've had 7 projects come along or opportunities, and 3 of those I declined to submit anything because they didn't fit. I didn't put a lot of information in here about what I did submit for because those are very confidential. And if you have interest in those, come talk to me. But the ones that I declined, I wanted to kind of explain, because many people that don't understand economic development, they think that you should submit a proposal for everything that comes across your desk. And that's just not true. So I have the examples or the information about the 3 that I did decline to submit for in here. I'll answer questions about those if you'd like, but I have the information here if you want to get with me to discuss it more. The first project was they required 40 acres and a 15,000 square foot building ready to go within 3 months. We just don't have that. The other things that same project required that just really didn't seem like a fit, they wanted $750,000 from the local city to start this pilot project that may or may not make. And it was for 10 employees. And that just didn't seem like a good gamble for us at this time, even if we had the property. Second project that I have here, they wanted us to provide them land and build the buildings, provide what they called heavy incentives. And it was to build warehouse space so that the company coming in could lease this space out. There are no jobs tied to this project at all. And I specifically responded back and asked for more information. What type of jobs are we talking about? How many? Who's the company? What's the average wage? And I was told there are no jobs tied to it. It depends on who this company can lease the space to. I do have a picture of what they were looking for us to build for them to lease out. And it didn't make sense for us. If we're going to build space, spend DIA money, taxpayer dollars to build a property for that, to lease out, it seems that we should be the ones leasing it, making the money on it. It didn't fit our community at this time. And then the last project that I wanted to talk to you about, they would only consider existing manufacturing sites where someone has moved out, vacated the premises. They needed 15,000 square feet plus 5 acres. They would only employ 15 to 40 employees. 40 would be the max within 3 years. And their average wage was only $37,000 a year. And I've been looking through our previous projects and we're like 50,000 and above for average wages. And I'd like to stay with that theme. DIA and the city of Durant historically has done a great job of providing high quality jobs with good pay for these projects that we're bringing in. And I'd like to keep with that if we can. So if you have other questions about these projects, I'll answer them.
Any questions for Lisa?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
All right, we'll move on to item number 11, which is informational items. I don't see any listed here. Are there any informational items? Okay. No action required then. New business. Don't have any new business to talk about as well. So the next item there is item 13, which is adjournment, and I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Secretary, record the vote.
Steve Brittingham,
Aye.
Jeff Hammack,
Yes.
Brandon Johnson,
Yes.
Chris Pierce,
Yes.
Janet Reed,
Yes.
Jeff Shattuck.
Yes.
We're adjourned.